part of my role here is as founder of Bradley Partnerships. We actually started as an outsourced HR consulting firm, similar to the work I've done over the past years. But my love is executive and career coaching. And when I coach people going through different career transitions, or hey, Lois, I need to get out of this job. I'm getting bored. I need to look for a promotion or a new job. Think of this as it is. It's an individual process. Each of you have different backgrounds, different skill set, different education, and different phases in your life. I think that's the other big thing. And my goal for you this evening is that you can walk away at the end of this session with hopefully some golden nuggets that you can use to apply in your careers. So that's my goal for you. So I thank you, Dean, for the welcome, and I'll be your facilitator, your primary one. Tonight, here's what we're going to cover. Three key things, right? First, I want to take the time for you to help you assess your career. I'm going to ask you a couple key questions, some of the questions that I typically ask when I'm doing career coaching. Also, we're going to go through for you to learn how to market yourself and define your personal brand. Now, you're probably wondering, well, gee, I'm not something off the shelf. But you are. You actually are. In the career progression process, you have a brand, and we're going to talk about that. And also, a big thing is learn how to search and apply for career opportunities, because it's a lot different than it used to be. I've been doing this for 30 some years, and I've recruited, I've hired, I've promoted people from within. Dean's example is a good one. Coach thousands of people on how to find and have their next career opportunity, whether that's a C-suite executive and all the ways to the frontline staff. So let me launch into this word that looks kind of strange, the ikigai, which is my focus here is what's your reason for being? So ikigai actually is a Japanese term. It essentially means a passion that gives you value and joy in your life. And I have to tell you, in all the years that I've been doing this, I've had some very interesting experiences, including actually helping a little company called AT&T employees in their career transition. And this was during the time when AT&T was actually trying to leave Pittsburgh. So I worked with over 700 people across the Northeast, Pittsburgh, Michigan, et cetera. And what I found extremely kind of I was blown away by the fact that many who were there a long time, some were 40, 45 years. When I talked with them, they really didn't like their jobs. They were only in it for a salary and good benefits and to provide for their families. There wasn't any of this passion. I really love my job. And if you think about it, the majority of our life for full-time employees is spent working. So my theme here is whatever you end up doing, just make sure you love it, because we all should be able to get up every day and love what we do. And so you see in the circle, the first thing on top is, what do you love? What do you love to do? What's a passion for you? And we'll talk about mission here in a little bit. What does the world need in terms of you and the career skills that you have, the various competencies or skills that you'll hear? I know there's a lot of you in project management. Some may have technology and these other skills. So we have to kind of sit back and assess, what do you really want? And what, in terms of what you love to do, can you be paid for that? That's the other big thing, right? And so that is something you want to consider, and really to assess, what are you good at? What have managers said to you, colleagues, friends? You're really good at project management. You should think about this, et cetera, et cetera. I've seen great project managers. I've worked with many of them. Some of them went on into the C-suite. So that is possible if that's your desire. We just have to figure out what, first of all, what you really want, what you love, and what you want to do. And this applies in all facets of your life, okay? Certainly your profession, your career is part of that. It is also, people have heard of, I'm sure you've heard of the wheels of life, the wheel of life. We use that in our coaching. Other people may have a career, but they may also have a vocation to do something different. Maybe you want to change the world and work with children or other things. And that's something to explore. So I always start off with asking the key question, what do you love to do, and what's your reason for being here, in terms of your career and job. So just something to think about. The other key parts I talked about earlier, the assessment, what is a career assessment? These are just a few of the questions that I ask when I'm talking with people about their careers. So, how fulfilled are you at your current job? I mean, do you really love it? Do you get up every morning and say, I really love this. I can't wait to do X, Y, Z. How are you learning and growing in that role? Is it challenging you? Is this something that you can maybe take to a different level if you want? What do you aspire to do? I'll use me as an example. I could still remember in my early 20s, early 30s, I said, you know what? I really like HR, and I'm going to be an HR director by X. And I did. I fulfilled my mission and actually went on to other very senior HR, chief HR officer, all these things. And they were great opportunities, but I wrote it down. I wrote down what I wanted and when I wanted it. And that's another thing. I know in today's world, we don't do enough. I feel it's really important to write things down. And you know why? Because it's a physical mind mental thing of when you see it and you go back to it, you live it. And that's what I would do every week. Actually, I would flip it over and I'm going to be an HR director by X. So seeing it, believing in it, if that's something you really want to do, then you can fulfill that dream. The other questions are, you headed in the right career direction? When you look at the progression of jobs, in order for me to have been an HR director, there were a lot of steps that I had to take to get there. And each of you in your careers, same thing. As I look back and I look at people who go through college and here's my major, it's okay. A lot of people don't do what their major was, right? I know a biologist, a scientist, his major was in biology and science, and he thought he was going to be a doctor, but actually he didn't go that route. He ended up being a technology person, an IT guru who ended up working for WhatsApp because Facebook didn't want him, and helped redesign a lot of the work that they were doing. It's kind of an interesting thing when you think about that. And some other questions, what can you do now? What am I going to do now? And what relationships do I need to build? So 3 questions. If you answered no to all of them, then that's a real sign for you that says, I need to do something, right? So that's just something to think about. So I talked a little bit about marketing. How do I market myself and my brand? And each of us has a brand. No matter what career we have, you have that brand. So the first thing is to be able to network strategically, to be able to have information interviews. So an information interview is not necessarily one where you applied for a job. It might be you have a colleague who knows someone who might be growing their business, and your colleague, your friend connects you to that person. That's kind of like an information interview where you're gaining knowledge about what that person does or what that company does. And is it possible that you could be a fit? So you want to focus on people or contacts that align with your goals. That's the first part of this. The other part is when you're out there networking, please be mindful of this. Don't just go out and ask for a job. It actually is a turnoff. It's similar to entrepreneurs. When I first started Bradley Partnerships 23 some years ago, I thought that I had to, ask for work. Well, no, people want to work with people that they have good relationships with, that they know they can trust, etc. So just be mindful of that. Instead, you want to ask them maybe to introduce you to other people that you can learn from. And I do that all the time when I'm doing my coaching. I know someone who would be a really good contact for you to meet with because they were in the same boat that you were in many years ago. Ask about their career path, ask about the challenges they had, and ask for advice. So that's number one. The second, and this is huge, building in your online presence. Now, I have several people, including my own children, who, Mom, I don't have time for that online. I don't have time for LinkedIn. Well, I got to tell you, that's how recruiters, we are currently recruiting a couple jobs. We use LinkedIn to find people. So, and then the other one is your personal website. I do have several folks who have actually created their own website. Typically, it's someone in technology, maybe somebody in marketing who really is looking at growing their career, but potentially even becoming an entrepreneur. So I have several people who have created their own website and some of the projects they've done. That LinkedIn profile is critical in today's world. It is critical. You don't want to just list the companies that you're working with, the title you have, and the dates that you work. You want to speak to your accomplishments. What did you do when you were there? What is the ROI or return on investment that you gave and you've given your current company? And ROI should be quantifiable. I increased sales by X. We ended up creating a new product line, blah, blah, blah. That's the kind of stuff that we want to look at. And then the third point here is to engage on social media. Now, be mindful of what you post out there. You don't want to stop with just your profile. You want to be able to post relevant content on a regular basis. So when I look at and I work with folks who are in career transition, we talk about this and what should they be posting and who, you can actually go to other people who made a post and comment on that. And it's recommended that you do this a couple times a week. Why? Because every time you do, it gets your name out there and then people become curious, right? And that's what I meant about comment on other people's posts. So social media is actually the number one way that we look for candidates. We actually recruit a lot of hard to fill positions, that your typical Indeed's not going to give you the right candidates. So proactive sourcing means we have to mine various social media sites and professional association sites. We're looking for people who have some great talent. You want to be able to increase your visibility, being proactive and demonstrating your brand. And by the way, this visibility, it's not just having your name and stuff out there. It should be strategic. How are you going to increase your strategic visibility? Being proactive and demonstrating your brand. How in your current work, in your current job, taking on new projects. Being able to speak at conferences or write a white paper. I'm working with a woman right now who has had an excellent career, but she really wants to rise the ranks. And one of the first things we talked about is speaking at conferences and speaking and doing some white papers to get her name out there. So this should be part, the projects, taking on new projects. If you think about it, I mean, I'm sure some of you have done this, but being part of a cross-functional team, for example, or committee, and tackling a new project, having some impact on the bottom line somewhere is always a great thing. Because when HR folks and the executive team are looking at rewards and recognition, and we have a team that did knock this out of the park in terms of increasing sales and revenue, we want to highlight them. So that's a huge deal. And some people actually make a post about that. I'm grateful for the opportunity to have worked with the team and we did XYZ, and they'll post that on LinkedIn. Well, that creates a buzz, at least for us as recruiters. The other thing is to ask for opportunities. So you and your boss, you might have a great relationship and maybe you're, I feel like I'm stuck. Talk if you can, and if you feel comfortable and hopefully you have a good relationship with your boss, talk to them about your career growth. Ask them for opportunities. Look, I love this job. This is great, but I've been in it for like a few years and I really would like to do something else. If you don't ask, nothing's going to happen, right? How are they supposed to know? Bosses don't have a crystal ball on their desk. I always say that, but it's so true. So, they have to know where your mindset is. An interesting statistic, according to a bunch of different surveys, whether it's SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, Career Builder, Glassdoor, et cetera, about 70% of recruiters use social media. And I just told you that we do to identify and screen candidates during that recruiting process. We really size up your LinkedIn profile. We look at different things. Certainly you want to be able to show your title and that sort of thing, but what have you done there? What have you done in the past? Your education, what's that? So another very important tip, if you feel like your LinkedIn profile needs a little polishing, this is certainly something you want to try to do to enhance it. So what's your personal brand? Now this is really important. And people say, why, Lois? Why is that important? Well, first of all, every single one of us in the work that we're doing, we have built, or we are building, if we're newer in our careers, we're building our reputation. Your reputation is how people perceive you, okay? And I've been part of the executive team. In those meetings, we talk about our people, and we talk about our employees. It's what people say about you when you're not in the room. As an HR person, when I used to be in organizations, I would walk the floors and try to see what are people doing, how are they doing. And some people came to me and said, look, I'm getting bored with this job, Lo. What can we do? And if I knew that, well, then I want to do something about that. So I don't want to lose good talent. It takes so much time and effort to recruit new people. And if any of you are in management right now, I would say, look in your house, look at your company. Is there someone who could be doing other things? Because you just never know about that. And also going back to social media real quick, it's not just LinkedIn. We also look at Facebook. We look at your Instagram, especially if we're really interested in you as a potential candidate. I could tell you some horror stories that we've seen. And I would tell you one big thing is try to stay out of the political world if you can, because you just want to stay neutral. Okay. You don't want to get into all that. But it shows how you come across. It shows what are some of your interests. And I think that's really important for people to see you, not just from a work mode in your career, but what do you like on the outside, And people do make postings on that. So what are some key steps to your personal brand? I have 4 tips here for you to think about. And for every single one of you, this is individual. What is your personal goal? I'll talk to people and they'll say, Lois, I want to be done working when I'm 55. That's it. And I always say, well, what are you going to do after that? Because I believe it's important to do something that's valuable related to work. Maybe it's a hobby. Maybe it's, I really want to work at Animal Friends, or it's something that you treasure in terms of a vocation. So what's your personal goal in terms of your career? So you want to get clear on that, and you want to get clear on what you are known for. So some of you are a couple of you had indicated, I'm not sure where I should go. But for those of you who, for example, love project management, and maybe you have aspirations to, rise the career ranks and maybe end up in the C-suite, how are you going to get there? So I don't know if any of you have heard of the term your elevator pitch. But I tell people, whether you're going to a conference, whether you are doing a networking event, every single person should have their own elevator pitch, being clear on what you're known for, what you like to do, and what you're looking for. So if you haven't thought about that or created one, it's certainly something to be mindful of. And of course, you're going to know your audience. Know your audience, meaning depending on who you're speaking to, that elevator pitch might change. For example, if I'm talking to a CEO at a conference, I'm going to talk a little different about our services versus someone who comes to me on, Lois, I really need some career coaching. That's a different pitch. Okay. Also, a mission statement. We talk about organizations and companies who have their mission statement, their mission, vision, values. All very important. I believe they are foundations to your organization, but you should have them for yourself. And what do I mean by that? A mission statement for you really, it's like 1 to 2 sentences. It defines you as a person, and think of the value that you've brought to the companies that you've worked for or are working for now. And what can you bring to your career? What do you want there? The other is the core values. What are your values? And I tell people this during the interview process. You do want to make sure that your core values align with that company's core values. So they might say, integrity and, delighting our customers, or maybe are some core values. When you're interviewing, you want to ask, so how do you live that? Really powerful question in terms of an open-ended question, but it really gives you some insight into, are they really living the core values that they say they do? And those should align with your own. So another very important thing that I like to speak to. So an example of your elevator pitch, because people have asked me, Lois, can you help me? What does that look like? So I wanted to give you guys one. So this is Joan. She says, she's at a conference. She says, hi, my name's Joan. I'm a project manager for XYZ. I work with teams across different departments. I plan, organize, we direct innovative marketing campaigns. In the past year, our work actually led to 25% increase in company sales. Wow. Now, here's the question. What does that say about Joan? When she says that, if you're a hiring manager, or potentially you know that you're going to be looking for someone in your organization, what does that say about her? Well, first of all, she's very results oriented and she's very team focused. She's not the, me, I beat my chest, I did it all by myself. So it says something about her ability to work with teams. She's also innovative. They probably did, maybe they never did this before in working with a cross-functional team to make this happen. And I've seen it happen. So this is all good stuff. And what does this pitch think about the value? What's the true value that it's brought to the company? Well, right here, 25% increase in company sales. That's huge for a company. And, that could potentially lead to a future promotion in the sales organization. Okay. So, when you think about where you are and maybe some of these projects that you work on, how can that parlay into another opportunity? Especially if you love doing it. So that's another thing to think about. So I want to talk about applying for career opportunities. First of all, let's look at it as an internal candidate. So, good organizations typically post their jobs internally and externally, and maybe you were aware of it or maybe you weren't. But let's say you go on your company website and you see this job and you didn't know anything about it. What would be one of the first things that you would do? So, let's be politically savvy. First of all, I think it's really important, if you have some interest, to make sure that you have a conversation with your boss, and let them know, gee, I noticed that opportunity over there for that person. I'm kind of interested in that. What do you think? Do you think that's something I could be considered for? Now, again, hoping that you have great relationship with your boss, that you can have those open discussions. I did it all the time with my staff. I had staff. Hey, here's a very important thing. A good leader has to look at their people. And if you happen to lose a person or two because they got promoted, kudos to you as a leader, because you help them grow. You help them grow in their career. And every person wants that. I've had many people, and 30 years ago, I still have my people who worked for me who got promoted. One of them is now a senior vice president for some big corporation where she handles comp. She didn't know about compensation. When she started as a receptionist working for me, I said, "Hey, you know what? You have an economic background. You love math. I need a compensation person." And I coached her and showed her a lot of different ways to do it and had her build our compensation program. This was for an IT company. So she took that and ran with it. So that's in the house. The other is referrals and recommendations. We talked earlier about how people get jobs. The majority of it is through networking. It is through referrals, recommendations. Maybe your boss is at an executive meeting or retreat and they're talking about new positions, and you have such a good rapport with your boss that they're going to be opening up a couple different new jobs, and your boss could say, "You know what? I got John on my team. I think he'd be a great fit for that." So 30 to 40% of, job opportunities, promotions, et cetera, do come through this way, whether it's in the house, in your organization or outside. In terms of doing a search, some of you at the beginning here said, "I need to look for a new job. I'm not sure what that looks like." Gathering intelligence is the first thing you want to do. Gathering intelligence. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means looking at a lot of different job opportunities and figuring out, wow, can I do that? I have the skills to do X, Y, Z. So you want to use various job search sites and Indeed, Glassdoor. There's so many out there these days, and look at jobs. Also, going to companies and their websites. So every now and then, I'll get a call that says, "Hey, Lois, I really would love to work for Duolingo. That company sounds so cool. I'd love to do that. Do you know anyone?" And I may know someone, or I'll give them some other assistance on what I think they could do. Reaching out directly to the hiring manager, especially if you know them, is a bonus. That's a real bonus. Someone said that at the beginning. That would be a good thing to do. And then contacting recruiters and search firms. So a couple of my women right now, they're C-suite, and they're looking for new jobs. And we talked about, look, you got to be proactive. Here's all the recruiters. Here's some of the things you need to do. And so that's what they have started to do, and that's good. The other huge thing, and I can't say enough about this. I'm going to hammer this one. Review and update your resume or CV. And tailor it to the job opening. When we have job postings out there, and people will just send a generic thing that they've sent to every job opening, probably through Indeed, it doesn't work. So I got a call from one of those candidates. "Well, I didn't hear from you. I'm not sure. Could I be a candidate?" And I pulled up his resume. I said, "You're telling me you have all these skills, but your resume is not saying that. You need to change your resume." So here's the deal. Your resume should be tailored or customized for that job opening. So when we help people in career transition or finding a new job, they might end up with 50 different job resumes because there were 50 different job postings, all a little unique. Definitely think about that. The other thing is, not all resumes are reviewed by a human. They're by the recruiter or whatever. They're reviewed by ATS scanners. So if you applied for a job, and typically these are larger companies, PNC, Giant Eagle, et cetera, they have ATS scanners. And what those ATS scanners do is they'll receive your resume, they'll go through it real quick and see if any of the words in your resume match the job posting, and that's when you're called. Very, very valuable, okay? The other part of that resume, and this of course depends on what level you're in. All of my senior professionals and C-suite, they have very specific areas under their job title that speak to key accomplishments and the return on investment. And return on investment must be quantifiable, okay? Like the earlier example of 25% increase in sales. The other thing is a follow-up email. Now, I have several people who say, "Well, Lois, well, I don't want to seem like I'm overbearing." Hey, it's okay to follow up. If you took the time to apply for a job, customize your resume for that job, within 7 to 10 days, you should be following up. Now, I will tell you this. Of all the positions that I typically filled when I was the HR person or my recruiters in companies, those individuals who followed up and did it professionally were typically the ones who ended up getting the job. Why? Because they showed that they really wanted the job, that they followed up. I want people who do follow up. That shows the kind of person they're going to be when they end up working with you or for you. So another key tip. Okay. And referrals and recommendations. One other area. All of you or many of you may have colleagues from different companies. Okay. Every now and then you should be talking to them about it. What's going on at your company? Is it growing? Do you see any opportunities there? Let people know. Because again, if they don't know, then how are they supposed to, think about, oh my gosh, Matt has great skills here. I think he'd be perfect. So, keeping you be front and center to their needs. I talk about practice. Let me just talk about what I mean by that. I know from years of experience that the majority of my introverts are a little uncomfortable. They find it challenging to do an elevator pitch, for example. Have that first informational meeting with a potential employer. Take that job posting, your resume, and go through it. You should know it. You should know it inside and out. The other thing, make sure you do your due diligence on that company you're applying for. One of my CEOs, when when we send him resumes and he'll screen, he'll do an interview with them. He tells me, Lois, if they don't ask me questions, if they haven't done research on my company, I don't want them. Very key point, right? So practice your elevator pitch, practice how you'll respond to different questions, prepare for events. If you're going to a conference, maybe it's another PMI event. Now, it's certainly a lot easier when we're in person, and I'm trying to get people to go back to that. I think it's important. That's the best way to network. It's kind of hard to do it when we're on a Zoom. This is okay though, in terms of providing a session. The other thing is have a business card. Now, you're wondering, well, what does that mean? If you're looking for a job, one of the things that I make sure everyone has is they should have a business card. My name is Lois Bradley. Let's say I'm not working for Bradley Partnerships. I'm Lois Bradley. My, HR guru is what I do, or, executive career coach. Here's my phone number. Here's my email. That sort of thing. This is especially helpful if you're in career transition, you lost your job, you're looking for a new job. It's a nice thing to leave someone with a physical card. There are some apps out there where you can do, a virtual card, and that's fine. I'm a little old fashioned though. I really do like the card itself because I really value those cards. I will go through them every now and then. I got to check on that person. How are they doing? Did they end up getting a job? I need to find out how they're doing. So that is another part of it. And practice in front of the mirror, practice in front of the dog or cat, practice in front of the family. Be prepared for the questions that you're going to be asked. Really valuable. The practice, I can't say enough about that in terms of preparing for your interview. Most companies will do a pre-screen interview. They might give you a call first, or they might do a Zoom interview. I tell all of my candidates who are applying for jobs, if you're applying for a job, please look professional, especially if it's a professional job. Okay. Project manager and up, we should look professional. It takes a little more effort, but what it says is that you're put together, you're ready to work. If someone comes to an interview and they're wearing a t-shirt and everything's all they just look a mess, what kind of impression does that leave me? I'm not really excited about how they presented themselves. So, another very important tip. So, in summary, because I wanted to allow time for questions, I kind of shared with you how to assess your career. You got some info on how to market yourself, define your personal brand. Hopefully, you got some gold nuggets or tips for how to search and apply for career opportunities. And I'm hoping that some of this is really helpful for you.